When comparing ancient Greece and Rome, one can say there are many differences as well as similarities. In order to understand them better, it is necessary to compare and contrast these two cultures. There are significant differences involving the geography, government, economy, position of women, and social classes, in addition to their classical art. Both ancient Rome and Greece cultures worshipped numerous gods, which led to conflicts and misunderstandings with monotheistic groups. They granted political rights to all free men, allowed slavery, and had armored soldiers who fought to protect their territory, which are just a few of the similarities. Let's look closer at a few of the differences and similarities, along with how these two ancient cultures have impacted modern society. Greece was a very contentious place during the time of its independence. Greece had perpetual conflict within and between its different cities. Most cities experienced multiple violent changes of government from foreign invasion and domestic upheaval. Rome maintained a continuous tradition of governance with far fewer interruptions. However, Rome maintained a continuous tradition of governance with far fewer interruptions. However, Rome was a contentious place also. Rome did a much more effective job at dominating its neighbors and then assimilating them into its institutions compared to Greece. Rome was able to preserve the appearance of continuity even after upheavals. Roman society was more effective over longer periods of time at maintaining political cohesion. The ancient Roman and Greek civilizations had well-organized political processes that greatly influenced the governments that were later structured in Europe and the United States. For example, the system of political parties, the establishment of divisions in government, and even political words such as democracy originated in ancient Roman Greece. The political structures of Greece and Rome were based on a city-state model. Although Rome developed a government similar to Greece and used many of its political principles, there were several differences between the two. The vastly different topographies of Greece and Rome influenced their political development. Though these are both Mediterranean countries, they differ in their terrain. Greece is a mountainous peninsula, including several small islands, separated by hilly countryside. All the cities were near bodies of water. Rome was an inland country bordered by mountains to the east, situated on the banks of River Tiber. Rome was able to develop as one large city-state that absorbed migrating populations and invaders from the north and south. Certain members of the conquered peoples and immigrant groups were offered Roman citizenship. Rome's political structure provided for representation by two political parties in the Senate. The patricians represented the nobles, while the plebeians represented the middle class and wealthy merchants. Interaction between the Greek city-states was limited, causing each to develop independently. Each city-state defended its independence and discouraged any effort to form a monarchy. The Greek government did not have political parties. However, the Greeks realized that allowing public officials to be elected by popular vote would nearly always result in the well-known citizens being elected. Greek officials allowed election to some public offices be decided by a lottery system open to any citizen. The Roman and the Greeks had political procedures for removing government officials not performing adequately. In Rome, two chief consuls served a limited term of only 1 year. Greece also held elections once a year for political positions not filled by the lottery. There are also differences and similarities in ancient Rome and Greek economies. The basis of both ancient Greece and Rome economies was agriculture. The two nations mostly interacted through trade at the Black Sea and Mediterranean regions. Greece developed through sea trade, whereas Rome grew by conquest. The trade also thrived due to security from Roman military. Initially, Greeks practiced fishing and trading. Greeks lived on small wheat-producing farms but had poor days because of improper agriculture practices, so they adopted mass production of olive oil. Olive oil and grapes was the major export by Greece, while Romans' common trade items were bronze and pottery. Both also practiced mining. Greeks and Romans both used labor from slaves. Initially, the Romans derived their labor from slaves whom they acquired in war, but later on, the Greeks adopted the practice. Roman women had it much better than Greek women. Roman women had more freedom of movement, better property rights, as well as the option to divorce and remarry. Roman women were afforded a type of marriage where they could remain under the jurisdiction of their fathers and become independent after his death. There were powerful women who influenced their husbands or sons. They shaped Roman history and became well-known public figures. However, most famous Greek women were limited only to becoming queens. Greek women were generally required to wear veils and had limited access to public spaces. There were different classifications of citizenship in ancient Rome. Only women and men over the age of 15 who had descended from Rome's original tribes were considered citizens. These male citizens were allowed to cast votes for political candidates and hold legislative positions. Other male citizens were allowed to vote but could not hold office. Women citizens were not permitted to vote or hold political positions. However, women of the upper classes could influence their husbands on politics. Women in Greece did not possess any rights as citizens nor own property. They were secluded and accompanied in public. Their main responsibility was to perform household chores, get married, and bear children. The highest regard they could attain was being the wife of a citizen. There was also significant differences and similarities in the division of social classes. Both countries had social classes created by wealth differences. In Greece, the society was divided into free men, slaves who were owned by the free people, metics, citizens, and women. Slaves were used as servants and laborers without any legal rights. Sometimes the slaves were prisoners of war or bought from slave traders. As the Greeks evolved, free men were divided between citizens and metics. A citizen born with Greek parents were the most powerful group that could take part in government activities. They could become government officials and take part in jury service. A metic was a foreigner that had migrated to Greece to either trade or practice a craft. A metic had to pay taxes, however, they could never achieve full rights of a citizen. Metics could not own land and were not allowed to speak in courts. These social classes applied to men only, as women took their social and legal status from their husband. Rome also had slaves, free men, plebeians, and patricians, citizens divided into two classes. The plebeians were the lower class and included everyone who was not a patrician. Patricians were the wealthy landowners. Both classes were able to own slaves if they could afford them. All free adult males were citizens no matter what their class. In both classes, the oldest male was the head of the family. Plebeians and patricians rarely mixed socially, although occasionally they would marry. When women were not considered to be citizens in ancient Greece, they were citizens in ancient Rome. In Rome, women were valued for devotion, humility, peace, loyalty, and marriage, had freedom of movement, and could own property. In the Greek family, sons could challenge their father's ability to run the family, while in Rome, sons were subjected to their father. The art of the ancient Greeks and Romans is called classical art, which is known for artistic simplicity, humanity, and sheer beauty. Greek art was considered to be superior to that of Roman art. They learned to represent the human form naturally and easily. They were interested in portraying gods, as they thought of their gods as people but more beautiful than any human being. Their best sculptures achieved godlike perfection in their beauty and were painted with bright colors. However, the early Greek statues were stiff and flat, but in the 6th century, the sculptors began to study the human body and its proportions. There were also beautiful temples in Greece. The Greeks had plenty of beautiful marble and used it freely for their sculptures as well as their temples. The Romans were influenced and learned sculpture and painting largely from the Greeks. When Rome conquered Greece, Greek art became interwoven with that of Rome. In the 2nd century, the Roman general began bringing back thousands of Greek statues. Wealthy Romans would build villas and fill them with works of Greek art. They would call for Greek artists to paint their walls and decorate with sculptures. Roman art was mostly used for decoration. They copied the statues of Greek gods and goddesses. The Romans were lacking in imagination and originality. However, they did produce many beautiful, realistic portrait statues. In painting, the Romans also learned from the Greeks. Portrait paintings flourished in Rome. Although Roman art loses in comparison to that of Greece, it still commands admiration. We owe Romans gratitude for helping to transmit the art of the Greeks, who were their great teachers and masters. In the beginning, both Greek and Roman residents practiced polytheistic religion. They worshipped numerous gods. Rome worshipped both Greek gods as well as a number of foreign cults. Early forms of the Roman religion believed that spirits inhabited everything around them. The first citizens of Rome also believed they were watched over by the spirits of their ancestors. The Greeks focused on life on earth and believed man would be judged on earth and his deeds would follow him into the afterlife, while the Romans believed that one's actions, if good, would make one go to heaven. The Roman gods and goddesses were not characterized by action, therefore not gender-specific, unlike the Greek deities. This fusion of Roman and Greek deities influenced Rome in many ways. As the empire expanded, the Romans refrained from imposing their own religious beliefs upon those they conquered. This was due to their early reaction to the Jewish and Christian populations. Eventually, all of their gods would be washed away, gradually replaced by Christianity. And in the eyes of some, this change brought about the decline of the Western Empire. As the Greek and Roman empires arose throughout Europe, new ideas would spread across the globe. Changes in governmental policies, art, philosophy were modeled after the Greeks and Romans. The legacy of ancient Greece culture has had a significant influence on cultures today, from the Olympics to world democracy. Greece is the founder of Western civilization and also the most influential one. The Greeks created language. Thousands of words are of Greek origin. Greece is the founder of philosophy, history, science, geography, astronomy, art, and coined money, to name a few. Theater was created in Greece. Trade was a large part of ancient Greece, which influenced our trading strategies. Ancient Greece passed on a new form of government and policies. The founders of the U.S. were influenced by Greek philosophies. The democratic tradition started the ideals of legal equality, personal freedom, and governance by the people. Democracy gave an equal vote to every man on issues concerning the welfare of city-states in Greece. The citizens developed the idea of placing limits on the official's term. Ancient Rome was an extremely successful empire. Our government, lifestyle, entertainment, and architecture was influenced by ancient Rome. Rome developed the science of urban planning, sewer systems, running water, interstate roadway systems, postage, military and government organizations, cement architecture, and Roman Christianity. Roman architecture is one of the most incredible things to see today. The Romans were most famous for coming up with design for aqueducts, the arc, and bridges, domes, and columns. Our most famous architecture today has Roman influence. In ancient Rome, hunting and fishing were very popular activities. Dice games, marbles, checkers, and ball games originated in Rome. Romans knew how to entertain themselves, and their ideas of having fun is still used and enjoyed today. Romans created a republic which served as a model for U.S. development. The Roman government contains a Senate. The Romans separated the government into three parts: the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive branch. The U.S. government today is split up into these same three branches. Our system is also a type of democracy with a Senate. In fact, our government is nearly identical with the Romans' government. The Romans had an emperor. The emperor did not have unlimited power, just as our president does not. The executive branch consists of two consuls who were elected for a year by the upper class. These two looked over the Senate and controlled the army of Rome. This branch also included tax collectors, mayors, and city police. The members of the Senate were appointed by the consuls. Finally, the judicial branches have 6 judges who were elected every 2 years. These judges decided punishments for the criminals. The judicial branch was extremely similar to our judicial branch. Even though there are several differences and similarities between ancient Greece and Rome cultures, the Romans were still enamored with Greek culture. Romans copied everything from the Greeks. They adopted their religion, architecture, and philosophies. The ancient Greeks and Romans interacted through trade, which was made convenient by the proximity to one another. The Romans adopted Greece's way of life. Nevertheless, the two nations practiced agriculture and mining, practiced polytheism, and excelled in art and architecture. Greeks were governed through democracy, while the Romans were republicans. The Greek art was superior to Roman art, although their architecture lacked arches and domes present in Rome architecture. In addition, women in Rome had a right to